Dick Whitnell.
Here.
Pam Curtis.
Here.
Ron Saxton.
Here.
Hannah Vandering.
Here.
Duncan Weiss. Here.
Okay. And is there anybody else on the phone there?
Nancy Golden.
Okay, hi Nancy.
Hi.
Okay, and let's go. Yes.
This is Katie Todd, her intern.
Okay. Thank you. And let's go in the room here today. Mark?
Mark Lewis from the OEIB. Doug Wells, Children's Institute.
Ellen Mack, Social Venture Partners Portland.
Dr. Dapo, Operation BC.
Jim Anderson, King PTA and Operation Easy.
Okay, great. Okay, welcome everybody. We're right in the process of getting some of the electronics put together here. I thought it was interesting this morning. My wife asked me, where are you going? I said, well, I'm going to the OEIB meeting subcommittee. And she said, oh, what's the name of that? I said, Outcomes and Investments. She says, who's on the committee? They better be better than just non-B students.
Duncan is.
Pressure.
Yeah, Duncan is. Yeah, since we got married at a very young age, but really though, where I'm going with this is driving up here. I was thinking about you four people and Ron on the phone here. I'm telling you, there's some, hopefully we can. We've been asked to be on here, and there's maybe the exception of the used car salesman. There's some serious talent on this board, so on the subcommittee. So hopefully we can get things done, and we got a big agenda ahead of us, and so it's going to be kind of fun. Okay, Peter. So let's go from there.
Okay,
Okay.
so we're having a little bit of technical difficulties. This is one thing I wanted to show. We may end up needing to get back to it. So the first agenda item is the Achievement Compact Initial Report. So this is the first time I think that this committee, or the whole board for that matter, has really looked at what's been submitted in terms of Achievement Compacts. So it's a first go-round. And just so you know, my intention in terms of presenting this is to get feedback not just on the data, but also on what you're seeing that maybe you want to see more of, or what you're seeing that's not clear, because what we're hoping to do is present descriptive information and then more detailed information on the compacts on a regular basis.
Peter, excuse me.
Yes,
Can you? Well, no. Can you give us the elevator explanation definition of the compacts?
Sure.
First,
You bet.
the
So on
30,000 foot.
a yearly basis,
Okay.
every K through 12 school district, every ESD, every community college, and every public university goes through a year-long process with a committee that's dependent upon the level. The committees are different at elementary or K through 12, community college, and university. They go through a process of looking at their initial data from the past year and then setting a goal for the next year as to what they're going to accomplish in a variety of different data areas that have been defined by the OEIB, and they're collectively known as the Achievement Compact Metrics. And we're going to talk a lot about metrics, what those metrics are today, but there are metrics for K-12, metrics for community college, and metrics for higher ed. And when districts set those goals, they set those goals in a public meeting, either at a school board, a community college board, or I'm not sure what it would be at the university now. It's going to be their independent board of trustees coming into the future, and they then submit their goals to the OEIB on a yearly basis. And so we get lots and lots of submissions, and we're beginning to analyze what the submissions mean in and of themselves. What are the goals that are being set statewide? And so this is the first time that that I know of, at least since I've been here, that perfect, good, I'll be up on the screen in a minute. This is the first time that we've really taken a look at analyzing them. And we are expecting that on a yearly basis, after it's submitted by these different institutions and agencies, that we would on a yearly basis do an analysis. And part of that analysis is going to be state level. That's what we're going to look at right now. And part of it might be local level, which is what we're going to look at on agenda item 3. And it's the charge of the OEIB to give feedback on this. I think it's good faith for the districts all the time, and the community colleges and universities, all the time they put into it, that we do something with that data. It should drive some of our thinking, and it should drive how we look at things like trajectory, which we're also going to talk about today. And really the reason all three of these agenda items are on the agenda for outcomes and investments is it's part of our charge to be looking at the achievement compacts, to be looking at where we're putting investments towards particular achievement compact outcomes, and to look at what kind of outcomes we could expect over time. So what we're going to talk about today is K through 12. 2 reasons. One is it's a nice soup to nuts. Yes, Hannah?
I just want to share.
Yes.
You've explained what a compact is supposed to be
Yes.
at the district level. There's supposed to be a year-long process. There's supposed to be these numbers that are turned into the OEIB. That is correct. This is what, our 3rd year?
Yes.
There is a disconnect between what's actually happening, the extent to which people believe that these are valuable at all in districts across the state, and the fact is, you're right, this is the first time that we've ever looked at data. Now, what we're looking at is a number. We see a number that the districts have put forward as their target for the metrics, each one of those metric that are set out. What we don't see is anything that tells us why they've set it at that level or what they're going to do to change from where they currently are to where they believe they can go. So we're seeing nothing on that. The second part of the compact, which is critical to our success, is the OEIB's support to the districts in order to get there. So I continue to struggle with, if we do this, and now we have these numbers, and we're going to look at setting trajectories today, what are we doing? What have we done as a board to provide to the districts the supports that will help them get to their goal that they've set? We haven't figured that out yet. And I struggled when we created the compacts about that second part of the handshake, that second responsibility that we have to them. Because we've told them by 2025, you have to have 100%. Well, all of you are bright individuals, know what's going on in our schools, know our students, and I think to set 100% and to say that we're going to get there without having a plan of how to do that is setting someone up for failure. And I don't believe it's us. I believe it's the students and the educators that are working with our students. So I would caution us again, as we look at compacts, as we look at what we're doing as a board and as a subcommittee, what's our part in helping our schools and our students have what they need to be successful? So, Peter, I really appreciate the fact that we're looking at this. I appreciate every one of the compact committees who have put in time and energy on creating these numbers and having the difficult conversations about where they are and where they want to go. But I want to dig in and I want to understand, what is it that we need to do? We've set 3rd grade reading as one of our highest priorities. If we're going to get there, then we have to know what we need to do to support the districts to actually make it a reality.
But isn't this a little bit of the tight loose? We give, the goals are there, and then how they get to the goals is part of the compact description of how they're going to get to the goals and that time.
Right, but we haven't provided them the supports that they need. I will just say, I don't believe in that we're doing that.
The Statesman Journal, I didn't bring it. It was, I know right where it is. Full page ad today, a full page, front page with Ron Saxton on how they're going to reward and districts today. And this is part of this goal achievement, is part of the funding. Isn't that right, Nancy? Did you see that Statesman front page?
No, I haven't seen it. Was that today?
Yes, and Ron is quoted. I just wondered where that played into this achievement of the goals on being rewarded for achievements.
So without, I guess, Peter, you've got your agenda. So
yeah. Let's
so, but I mean, Hannah's point. I mean, I think this is a critical question of the role of the compacts and how we address it. So I don't know how you're planning to process, but I'm I mean, do we
Yeah.
want to get into this conversation now? I mean, just in terms
Yeah.
of agenda, but I think it's a very important conversation to have.
Dick, I would
Yeah.
really like us to have the conversation.
Okay.
If this committee is going to be looking at the compacts, then I really believe it's time for us to have an honest conversation about what the compacts are and what they're doing. Because if we don't change course, these are a joke in districts. They're spending a lot of time and energy, and I am tired of wasting their time. If we're not going to do anything to give them the supports, then we need to figure out what we're doing together to make a difference for them and the students.
Peter, these questions that Hannah's bringing up, let's put that on the agenda for
Oh, you
next
bet.
time.
And Nancy's on the line, and I think if there's one thing we talk about the most, I think, of the last couple of months is achievement compacts, and I think it's going to be something that Dr. Golden's going to be working with the OEIB board on some of those deeper questions. I'd like to put out that it's often good to look at the state of things right now in terms of data. Sometimes the data suggests where you want to ask deeper questions, and actually my greatest hope is that we get a ton of board conversation or subcommittee conversation. So thank you for all of that, Hannah, and this is really meant to prompt discussion from this committee and others about, well, what next, what does it mean? Because the numbers themselves, I think, are just numbers, and they represent hundreds of thousands of individual, in this case, K through 12 students. So what I did want to mention, and I'm happy for questions at any
Okay.
point. Today's just K-12. A couple reasons for that. One is that I wanted to follow through in the 2 hours that we had from beginning to end. It's talking about compacts, trajectories, and then some return on investment stuff related to compacts and spending, all around K-12. I think jumping back and forth is a little confusing. For one reason, the higher ed achievement compacts are not as well fleshed out in some ways as K through 12, maybe not as well understood and maybe shifting a little bit. The funding model is nowhere near as clear. We get this amazing information from the Oregon Department of Education about funding and spending in districts that's not necessarily as attainable. It's just a little bit different. So I think it's going to look a little bit different than what we present here. And I think it's okay to have the conversations be one than the other. But I do want to emphasize for folks on the phone or anyone in the audience that this is just as relevant, all this goal setting, everything Hannah talked about in terms of what do you do with the compacts at higher ed as well as K-12. And now I'm getting unable to connect to the internet. Okay, so what you have before you, the first item it's entitled 2014-2015 K through 12 Achievement Compacts, Initial Descriptive Analysis. This is an analysis of submission information from 196 Oregon school districts. We have 197. If you're wondering, my understanding is that there's one that has no Oregon students that go to another state, and although we have a district, they don't fill out a compact for that reason. A very technical thing, very tiny school district. So we have essentially every school district in Oregon did submit on time and correctly the information that is then reflected in an aggregate on this handout. And I want to walk you through it, but I want to go through a couple of notes, first of all, that are at the bottom. Note number one is this is from all Oregon school districts. However, in some cases, when Oregon school districts submitted their compact, and if I could get on the internet, I want to show you where you or anyone in the audience can find this. Educationoregon.gov, which is our website, has a link to every Oregon compact submitted by every K through 12 institution. So you can open it up to the OEIB website if you're from Portland, if you're from Grants Pass, if you're from Drain, and look up your district's achievement compact in detail. All of the information we're going to talk about today and more is there for your district to compare. That's note number one, or that's in the notes. That's actually note number two. If you have the handout, note number two shows you that link. Note number one, if you look at a district's achievement compact, some districts submitted a 0 in terms of a goal. And what a 0 is meant to be, as far as we're concerned at OEIB, and it's what our instruction is to districts is, if you don't have any students in the category, you put 0. So if what it says in the compact area is how many Native American students are going to earn 3 or more college level courses in high school, and you put a 0, that means you don't have any at all. It doesn't mean that you have an expectation of 0. And so we're not including those in these calculations. But you may see it if you go to the website, you may see some zeros there, and that's what that means. But if you put them in for the averages and stuff, it really skews the average and really bumps up that standard deviation. With that, I'd like to talk about the table. What is this table? So on one side, you've got the Achievement Compact metrics. And those are the column. It's labeled K through 12 Achievement Compact metric. Just because this is the way the districts see it, this is the order you're seeing it, it's kind of funny, but it starts with 4 high school metrics, and then it's got, goes to kinder, and that's just the way the districts see it, so that's what I followed. So you start with 4-year cohort graduation. Does anybody not see where that is? 4-year, okay. If you're reading across, actually, I feel like I should display this.
Ron, do you have this in front of you, Ron?
Sorry?
Do folks have this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, great. So if you look over on 4-year...
Yeah, I did. Yes, I just had to get the mute button.
Okay, Ron, good. Thanks, sorry.
And what I'm going to do, just so folks know, I'm not going to walk you through every cell. I'm going to walk you through one line, and then we're going to have just a little bit of time to look at it, and then see what kinds of questions come up. I've got a number of talking points on it, but I hate for me to be talking too much, because I'd rather you just kind of took a look at the data. You look at 4-year cohort graduation. The first column to the right of that is the current state. And I've cited that comes from the Oregon statewide report card, which is a newly printed document that's on the ODE website that I recommend highly to anyone in the room or on the phone. It's 80 pages chock full of amazing data. And I cite it often in the research that we do at OEIB, and I mention it here. And so for 4-year cohort graduation, our current rate is 68.7. You may wonder, well, Peter, why are you not showing the disaggregated data? And I have a note number 4 about the disaggregated data, that it's on I showed you what page it's on. The reason we're not printing it on this form is because the way we disaggregate data in each of these compact metrics is a little bit different. And actually, the form would be just incredibly huge. We can look at it by going to the report card, and I'm looking for a way to display it easily, but it's not the same calculation each time. And so for here, it's just the all students. It is not the disaggregated number. Next to the disaggregate, the all students, you see what is the goal that the Oregon district set this year. So we are at 68.7. The average goal set in Oregon was 81, and the average goal set for disadvantaged students, which is a special calculation we use on the achievement compacts, is 76. And disadvantaged is an aggregate number that includes all students of poverty, all English language learners, and all students who are in the opportunity gap based on race and ethnicity, which basically means non-white, non-Asian race and ethnicity.
And the
So
goal,
it's a complicated little metric that we chose at OEIB. So do you want to ask a question on that? Duncan?
What goal for when? By what date?
Next year.
Okay.
All of the achievement compact goals for both K-12 and higher ed are 1-year goals. If you look one over, you see standard deviation. And I don't want to have a statistics class, but I want to say a little bit about what this means because it's relevant. Because smaller means districts had less deviation in terms of the goals they set than larger. So it's an indication to us at the statewide level when we look across all of these metrics, where do districts have more agreement about where they set goals and where is there less agreement. And you'll see in some of these goals the deviations are almost twice as high as this one. I think that's interesting and worth talking about. So the standard deviation for the cohort graduation is 12 and 15.
To the mean statewide average.
To the mean statewide average. And I do want to point out that this is there's lots and lots of districts here. So there's a lot of the N in terms of what we're measuring is 196. It's pretty big. The last column is the range. So the lowest district, the lowest goal set in Oregon was 40. And the highest, and this was represented in many districts in Oregon, but nowhere near a majority, but many, was 100. So we have some real disconnect about how districts look at this goal. I think we've talked about that as an OEIB board. Some districts set this to be aspirational, some set it to be strategic, and some are just very predictive with
But
it.
the average of all of what you just said is 81.
Right,
Okay.
Can I ask you a question? about
absolutely.
that?
So I'm going to stop and not take questions.
It
So-
gets back to something that Hannah raised, kind of, or it starts to approach that. So, to your last point, Peter, about, some districts do this as aspirational, some do it as, for other, where do we have information about how districts are viewing this and how they got to their number?
So, great question. When the process was set up, what we asked districts, community colleges, and Board of Trustees at higher ed is to write a plan that got submitted to their board. But to submit to OEIB only the goals, and if they choose, to add a comment or two. Most districts choose to submit no comment to OEIB. They do submit something to their school board, and as Hannah referenced, it varies board to board, district to district. Some of those plans have a lot of depth to them in terms of why we set what we set, and others are more perfunctory, and we don't collect it. And that's, I think, another question before the group, along the lines of what Hannah was asking, what I've heard before is, well, let's get real specific on what we want to collect and what we would do with it. I think until we evidence that we're going to do something with data, it's hard to ask districts to submit a plan unless we're going to really read it and analyze it. But right now, we don't collect anything but the number. So when they put 100, there are districts with very high graduation rates that might really be what they mean. And there's others that are at 67 who put 100.
I think there's a point that we miss, though, to the lay public, is that the difference between 68.7 and 81. What's in it for me? And I mean dollars and cents. I mean, that's a pretty significant, by raising that, what does that do? Econ Northwest can put a dollar amount to that. But I mean, we need to talk in cold, to get everybody on board to support what we're talking about here. I don't think people see what the value is. I mean, I guess maybe I'm talking for myself, but I think there's a real economic, not only the transformation of that life who now is at the 81 level, and we want to be obviously up to the 100, but there's by just going from 68.7 to 81, what does it do to how high is the tide?
Well, in the business case that we did for the state longitudinal database, I'm seeing if I could call it up really quickly. We calculated using research what is the value of a high school diploma. I'm not sure I can pull it up this second.
Okay, that's what
But we
was-
have it. There's research on exactly what that is.
Yep, okay.
It's a stunning amount of money for
Okay.
every high school graduate that we add to Oregon. It's very significant, both for the economy and for the student. It's
Yes.
not as great an increase as we get for every kid we get kindergarten ready. That's an even bigger payoff, but the payoff is extraordinary. And if you'd like, I could include data like that, but it's such a big number that sometimes people don't even believe what the return is. It's stunning. Hannah?
Yeah. Which is why the investing in education to make sure we get it right is important. But I want to go back to your
Exactly.
question
Exactly.
around the compact committees, and I'll use Portland as an example. And one of the greatest things that came out of creating the compacts was that we built a collaborative group of administrators and educators who are working together to really look at the data. And I have to tell you, from everyone that I've talked to across the state, where they actually pulled that together, the impact that has had on the district, district-wide, their relationship is so important. That's the best thing that's happened. And they have had those conversations, and I've talked with some of the members of the Portland group, and Portland included community members, PTA, and so that was really a
Chamber of
great
Commerce.
model.
Business
But when they talked about where they were and what they needed to do, they did create some, here's what we would put in place if we're going to do it. But then the buck kind of stopped there, and it never went to that next point, which I believe we talked about extensively, which is if you're going to have all of these conversations, you're going to talk about those strategies and tactics. If you don't invest in them, if you don't change the budget at the district level, which is where that loose comes in, we have to quit telling them what to do with it. But where the loose comes in, where they actually create the learning conditions that are necessary, and it's going to vary. Even in Portland, it'll vary by by high school feeder area. There are some huge differences in what you would invest, and that's what I'm getting at as far as what we're doing to really listen to them and understand. So when the strategic investments come in, is this what people are telling us that they need? That's what I'm hoping that we can really dig into to understand, because if the outcomes are the compacts, if that is really what we've said, then what are we putting in place to get?
Well, and so, not for now, but maybe for just a flag for a future conversation as we continue to have this, that I see a mismatch between what we have in front of us and how we support districts in getting there. Mm-hmm. And some of it's a mismatch in terms of the information available to us. If all we're looking at is these numbers, but we don't have the, for lack of a better way to say it, the qualitative understanding of what's happening and what people are doing, there's nothing we're going to be able to do to support it. On the other hand, you don't want to ask people to just submit oodles of stuff, because that's just an exercise in frustration for everybody if we're not going to use it. So, but there's clearly a mismatch, I think, between, this is really helpful, particularly at an aggregate level, so that we can sort of see big picture. But there's so much depth underneath this, and it sounds like we don't, from what Peter said, we don't necessarily understand that depth or have a mechanism in place to understand the depth.
So, I don't know, I mean, again, I agree with everything you're both saying, and I don't want to mess up your plan, Peter, but, I mean, I think let's just step back. What is the purpose of the compact? I mean, I think that's what Hannah's really raising, and where, it's had its evolution over the years, but I think Hannah's right. The original concept of the compact was it was a two-way deal. It wasn't like states imposing this goal on the districts, you got to go do it. It didn't have that. It was, we all agree reading at third grade is a very important goal. I don't think many people would disagree with that. I think there is a state role to help get everyone focused on that, which we've done in this budget process. So let's really ask, what is it going to take? But to me, the compact should have not necessarily a detailed plan of what the district is doing, but ideally the compact should, if they want to, say, where are you going on third grade reading, to use that example, and what supports is exactly what Hannah's saying. You need from the state to make that happen, and it can be financial support, but I think just as often it could be, what do you want out of the professional service delivery that we've already got available through the, that professional service, or what, I mean, there are any number of things that they might need, including early childhood investments, that would enable them to be more successful. And if we don't get that information, I don't think, we can't really have this two-way conversation without understanding what supports they need from the state. And so I think we do need to think about that. And again, without making it a bureaucratic, if this is just a bureaucratic relationship, that we actually have to understand, we can't make it so detailed. I mean, we've done this, I'm going back to the state board days, we have these school improvement plans. I'm sure Peter and Nancy have done them for years, and we have these deep requirements where we've done this for years. And the schools are expected to create school improvement plans that have got a whole set of, and it really is not unlike the achievement compacts in a lot of ways. And frankly, we got them all, and I don't think we ever really spent much time reviewing them, and so it didn't, and what my dream on the OEIB is that we would have more purposeful reviews so that we could have a two-way handshake. And then,
this is me.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Let me weigh in. Remember, I'll be bringing back to OEIB some recommendations about achievement compacts. And, we had done a study, we had made recommendations, we've been working as a board around that. And we still are, and I'm reviewing all the work from the previous committees, and two of the recommendations that we're really thinking about play into this. One thing is, there's already a lot of, we have achievement compacts, we have report cards that are aligned. Report cards is where we get the actual data, through the report card of how well districts are doing. There's also, at the ODE level, like you said, there's other tools, like there's a consolidated district plan. There's site councils and things like that. So one of the recommendations is that we really create this into a seamless system, that we're doing exactly what you're all talking about. When the Achievement Compacts came out, we talked about targets, and we talked about that the plan would be kept at the district level, because how they go about it is really their work. Now, I'm hearing everyone, and we all agree, we need some information to help us think about if people are setting targets, what do they need to get there. So, but we don't want to add another requirement without looking at what's already there. How could we analyze that? How do they align? How do they become more of a part of one system? So it sounds like that would be a really important recommendation to bring forward to the whole OEIB. The second thing that we were wanting to do is, as an OEIB group, go out and do meetings with different stakeholders where we say, these are the measures, this is where we've got, what do you think would be important to move this? So we would be talking to educators and other stakeholders. The third avenue we have, as opposed to requiring everyone to hand in their plan, where in Analyze 197 would be to start looking at the people on both sides. So, look at the ones that are setting really high goals, getting high results. When Peter talked about return on investment, look at the people who maybe have just set low goals, and to go out to them and to say, to help us understand your thinking, why did you set the goal here and what would you need? So I think all the work you're talking about are things we're very much in process as having as recommendations back to the OEIB.
Okay, Peter.
I just wanted to point out that after we do this, there is some time to reflect on which of these metrics are their proposed investments, especially as we talk about trajectory. And we'll get to trajectory in a minute. Those are very drafty. And I think we should look at, given investment, are these realistic, or which one is the slope too sharp, or what have you. Mm-hmm. So looking at the rest of the handout, I've walked you through the 4-year cohort graduation. And what I was hoping is to give you a little bit of time and a little bit of direction in looking at the rest of this table, with the hopes of generating some feedback from the group. And in particular, I'm interested in, again, we want to share things like this on the website. We want to share it back with districts. We'd like to give some comment. Here's where your district is versus the whole state, just to compare. And this might be a tool, this thing you're looking at right now, a tool or something close to it that we might share with districts as part of written communication. So just as a piece of data, just as a table, are there things that stand out about it, questions that you have, things you wish you saw, and then surprises just about the data? Are there things on here that you're really, really surprised at what the number is statewide? And I've got some. If you guys folks don't have any, I happily share what surprised me.
I think it's critical, though, to look at this as a glass half full, all the goals, but having the entrepreneurialism to do better and prick the consciousness of the stakeholders, meaning the community as well as the professionals, to do better. I mean, I fall back to the progress board, and we're just one county, but you got more mileage by just like this in a positive way, showing where we were in the 36 counties. How many counties are there? 36. 36 counties, and I mean, this was easy to rally. I think it's easy not to stifle, but to bring in what Hannah has talked about, where people, the collaboration, and that Malheur County is not the same as Multnomah County. And so keep their ability to use this to, I don't know, I guess I'm talking about the business model. You can do a lot of, you can sell Dodges in 1980 if you got the right attitude, you know, so.
So one thing,
And time is 23.
when we get to number 3, we actually have some highlight success stories to talk about in Oregon based on return from investment. That I'd love to get some feedback on how do we highlight, how do we learn from those districts. But just sticking with the table, I'm trying to be a little slavish on this just because I'd like to get some feedback.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, you
Yes.
bet. Fire away.
So I'm trying to follow where you're, I'm still looking at the page that says achievement compact targets to determine trajectories. Is that where I'm supposed to be?
No, I'm sorry, Ron. We're on the initial descriptive analysis. It's the first handout. It's just one page with a table that has metrics and then columns that start with the word current.
Okay, so you're not ready for my questions on that one.
Trajectories, no. That's agenda number 2.
So,
Okay,
so
I'm back with you, I'm sorry.
Okay, so you want reactions?
Yeah.
First of all, the surprise, it's not a surprise, but it's one that continues to really sort of, well, it's I think, an important data. It's post-secondary enrollment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
65%, but look at that range of goals.
Yep.
I mean, if we have a goal that people, I mean, again, this is my high school, college completion, we should set this goal. This is the easiest, most important piece of work we could be doing. Making sure that in every high school, the basic ethic is when you're a freshman in high school, our expectation is you're going to college in some form. I understand we're only ultimately expecting 80% to go on, but if you have a culture in your high school that expects college going, and you build the systems to do that, I think that. I mean, what this strikes me, 25 to 100, is we obviously have a whole bunch of high schools in Oregon where the culture, by design, is not that kids aren't going to college, and that to me seems more like an attitude issue than a, you know.
I agree.
And that's something I think we could potentially change pretty quickly, and I think that's worth exploring. I don't know what I'm curious what others see there, but. Because it isn't really it's not an educational outcome necessarily.
I'd like to also note that the 3+ college
Right,
level
that's where I was
courses,
going.
look how low that number.
Yeah, and so it's just really an expectation question of what we.
That's part of where you get to this qualitative, like
Yeah.
how do people understand this and
Yeah.
what's happening there
Yeah.
and how are they viewing this? And I think I viewed those two connected and the range is pretty striking, which tells you that something's happening there. The other places that jump out to me, Peter, to answer your questions are 3rd grade reading and the math, and both of the maths here, 8th and 5th grade math, in terms of the range that we get. And I would think that, to answer your other question about, is this table useful? I mean, frankly, I think the state, in the direction of the two-way handshake, needs to be providing some data back about the aggregate, which is this or a version of this, and maybe even a version that says, here's the aggregate and here's where your district is, so that districts can map themselves relative to everybody else.
That's what I was thinking. I mean, what is on this table, just in terms of the table, it would be interesting to know what the actual deviation is.
Right.
As opposed to the expected. So where are we?
Right.
You know, you've got 68% cohort graduation. What's the range among the districts?
Yes.
So in terms of the current.
What is the range? And ideally, even maybe some best practice district,
This is the aspiration, what's real.
What's
and then
real
where-
going on.
I mean, if I'm
How
a
much range?
superintendent, I want to know where I am relative to
Right.
this. This doesn't get to the depth, this just gets to that initial surface, and I
Right.
know we need to talk about that, but.
If I could direct the committee really quick, Hannah, just to show you, just really quick, just when you leave here today, the achievement compacts for every district are on our website, and then for every community college and every university. But I'm hearing maybe an additional tool would be good, but this is, go ahead, Ann, I'm sorry.
But no, it's okay. If you want to show that, sure, please.
I'll just click on it just to let folks know sort of what it looks like. Here's what you see for the district. Adele's really small, but you've got every district, what their actual score was in the cohort, how their disadvantaged students did than what their goal was moving forward. Some districts are able to set a 4-year goal, most choose not to. Everyone's able to, most choose not to.
That's interesting. So.
Yeah. So, go ahead, I'm sorry.
So when you talk about the post-secondary and the 3+ college level courses, I'm thinking about the conversations that have gone on in those districts. So you've got, and I know our rural districts that are struggling to be able to offer different courses because they're so small. They're really struggling with how they do this. So this is where I say this doesn't really help, and we can't think that someone is not doing their job or not having high expectations if we don't know their reality. When we went out to Baker and we're talking with them, so what is the expectation and how do we change? It's not just in school, it's a community-wide culture of college going. We have with the second highest tuition in the nation. Our students aren't going to college because they can't afford to go to college. We're the second hungriest state in the nation. So we've got a lot of things working against our students who need us to lift them up. And I would be more interested in having a conversation for the districts that set their goal at 5%. Why? And what do we need to do to help you? That's where where I'm looking for us to go. Not because we put this out in the Oregonian and people go, oh, this is awful. Well, but let's look at the realities of what is happening, and then are we as a state ready, and are we as a board ready to really push the envelope in here's what we need to put in place in order for students in Oregon to have the education that they deserve. So I think it would be fascinating to have some conversations with some of these compact teams about what it is they discussed to set these targets.
Anna, and that's what I was talking about when I said we would go out to some districts and do. I think you just put it beautifully. That's exactly what we would do with ones who set them, really high and really low, or just pick some different sizes just to really find out what you're talking about.
That'd be great. Thanks.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
Okay.
Any other, so I've taken the feedback, taken notes. I think Nancy's listening closely on this in terms of next steps. In terms of the table, I see how it could be configured even a little bit better. I'd like the disadvantage data to actually show on it. And what I heard someone say at the table is if it would be nice if you got a report for your district,
Yes.
sort of that was pre-populated.
Yeah.
Here's how you did here, just so you can compare.
Right.
But then following up, what are the deeper meanings behind some of maybe the low targets or high targets that we're seeing? Anything else on the table for Ron or anyone else looking at it that you had questions about? Is something like standard deviation a good thing to put out there? I mean, it does show you, for instance, that among completing 3+ college level courses, when we look across Oregon, that's the area where we have the most difference about probably capability.
Yep.
Not as, well, who knows what, but there's difference.
We need to find out we don't think we should assume we know.
I think it's interesting to note that where we have the least disagreement statewide is on not chronically absent at the 6th grade. High degree of districts setting high goals around that. And you'll note we're at 88%
We're
right now.
already high there, so yeah. May not be
Smaller is the ceiling effect. So
Yes,
they call
that's
it.
right. Well, I guess the question, so I'm trying, now let's talk to the table. It's useful to me, I guess. Is this a table to broadcast and useful for larger audiences? Are you asking that question?
Yeah, I think that's one of the questions.
I would say probably not, honestly.
Needs to be.
I think we could find a way to make it more user
You-
friendly. This isn't a table to me that, I'm a data nerd, and I don't think this is not one that jumps out at me if you're talking about grabbing a school board member or a school leader. I don't.
No, but it could if you could graph it. Like
Yeah, no, there are ways to make it
If
good,
you used
yeah.
a forest plot or
Yeah.
something, and you could plot just not the standard deviation, but where then each district
Yeah.
is within that, as well as what the aggregate is. But if we're going to do that like far and wide, then I think we need to take an extra step now I know Nancy's talked about what the long-term plans are, or the medium-term plans are, but the extra step now to me would be like, say, for example, on this, the big one where you have a big range, just even to do a quick little snippet illustration of somebody who's way down at the 5 and somebody who's way up at the 100, to just illustrate the range of realities that we have. Because I think the numbers alone, without those illustrations,
Right.
don't potentially lead people to conclusions that are not appropriate
Right.
or accurate. So,
The balance to that is that we don't want to
Dick?
get away. Yes, go ahead.
I didn't want to interrupt.
No, go ahead, Ron.
Okay. Well, I guess the thing that's not here that maybe I missed in the discussion, but is, it's interesting, the goals that people set, but it's not as interesting as whether they actually accomplished them.
right.
Yeah.
And so, if you set a goal of 100 and you hit 50, that's not very impressive. You hit a goal of, 50 and hit 50, maybe that's more impressive. But I just think, just a second, I have to turn off a teapot that's whistling.
That's good. You're making us jealous.
Envious, yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. So I'm concerned that putting out data that just shows that some people are a lot more optimistic than others, or some are, telling us what they think we want to hear, and, kind of who's realistic, who's too pessimist. Maybe that's an interesting psychological profile of how people think about this, but it's not very useful information about how we're doing towards actually moving to 40-40-20. And so I'm a lot more interested in, if we're talking about what we're going to share, I'm also more interested in what I'm going to see of people set goals, and how do they do against those goals.
Well, Ron, when your managers came to you and gave you production numbers or sales numbers or what have you, how did you relate to them with their numbers that they set for the previous year, for the next year on goals?
Well, you want to make sure that they are reasonable given their past, and that their compensation and everything is tied to achieving what they gave.
Yeah, exactly.
So if we go back to the very first compact, when we did it, and I don't want to cry over spilt milk, but we agreed before we sent it out that it was a baseline setting. And districts were told that up front, and so they turned in their compacts with what they thought were realistic expectations. And what happened? They got thrown back in their face. Rudy sent them back to them, and they said, you're not setting high enough goals. Well, if you're not providing your managers with the right resources and the materials that they need to produce, then you can't really expect them to get where you want to go. And just as we have with our educators in our schools, if we're not providing them what they need to be successful, then you can't get 100% results with students if you're not providing them with the learning conditions that will allow them to be successful. So I think when we look at these numbers and what numbers are setting, part of this is skewed because of that very first compact, because people got, okay, fine, we'll just tell you what you want to hear. But I would rather them be honest with us and tell us what do we need to do, and set high expectations, but set them based on the programs and the services that they believe will help them get there, and knowing that all students can learn, and we're going to have to differentiate that investment.
But there's a tension there, though. If your management comes to you with these goals in a business, and the pro forma it has you losing $50 million, then you have to go back, do the analysis that you talk about to make those goals that at least you can make some money or whatever, you be successful. Right. So there's this tension that on the goal setting that I guess my outside experience in looking at the education system and other statewide things is that we don't keep, in the past we haven't kept real score. There hasn't been a scoreboard on where we are. And so now we've changed all that because of what we're doing here. Now there's the opportunity to supplement what's missing as far as resources and what have you to achieve those goals. And I think that is really important. So I don't know. So,
I just think, as I said, our goal, our charge as a committee is, as an OEIB, is move the state to actually get the 40-40-20.
Yeah.
So I think however we accomplish this, the achievement goals are supposed to be helping us take steps in that direction. And the information that's useful is, are we in fact taking steps in that direction?
Just that simple.
So I just want to point out at the local level, what districts got this year was how they did this year, Ron. And when the compact committees, and obviously they're real different, there's probably 197 different ways they do it, but most of them start off with the year before's goals. So here's what we set the year before, here's the brand new form from ODE and OEIB, how do we do? And they use that as part of their next goal setting. So what's up there, and we could certainly provide this, is information about did districts hit their goal.
That'd be really
What's interesting about that is, how do you differentiate the ones that said 100 from the ones that said 66.45? You have to sort of make a decision, and if that's the kind of analysis that this committee would see,
But it's important that, to Dick's, if somebody keeps setting goals and never hitting them, the next time they come to me and tell me their goals, it's not worth my time listening to them. I'm going to roll my eyes, And so, so we go through this a couple times. People can set their goals, using their own judgment. But at some point, if they're hitting them, wonderful. Let's measure the steps we're taking.
Yeah.
If they're not hitting them, and there's no consequence of not hitting them, nobody publishes it, nobody talks about it. We just say, okay, give us something number next year. That to me is a waste of time because, their projections meaningless. They're not really motivated to make it accurate. They're just telling us what they think we want to hear. So it's got to be tied back. If there's any credibility to these things, come the second, third, fourth time we do it, it's got to be because somebody started hitting their goals.
So, I agree. And I think we have to make sure that they're setting realistic goals. And I think that's what we have to as a board is help them understand. We don't want you to make up a number. We don't want you to tell us what we want to hear. We want you to tell us what is actually going on in your district. So even when you look, just pull third grade reading. For a district right now, if they're looking at what they have for this year and now they're looking forward into next year, if there may be a small district where they know that the second grade classrooms this year are at 28 and 32, and they look at their poverty rate, they look at all of the implications or all of the demographics of that group, and they're setting their target for next year. And if next year's target is lower than this year, are we as a board willing to understand their realities and listen to them to say, if they need additional resources or support in order to help move that next year's third grade class, then are we willing to do that, yes or no? And if we're not, then we can't expect them to move the dial. We can't expect them to produce, as we talk about, produce results or get a return on investment if our investment does not meet the needs of those students that are in that classroom or in that district. So I think it's a much deeper conversation. And I look forward to the conversations that Nancy has brought forward as going out and really listening.
Okay, we're just looking at the time. I feel like I had a ton of great feedback. I appreciate any folks either listening or present who have more feedback on this handout as a communication tool, either for the board or districts or public. I'm more than happy to take feedback.
Okay, moving on then.
Our second item, again, I said all these three are very related to each other. So if you look at the legislation, one of the roles of the OEIB is to collect these compacts. Another role, one we've never taken up, I think we need to make some decisions about how to take it up, so it's good to have the conversation, is to provide trajectory. So when districts are asking these questions about goal setting, one question is, well, where do we expect to be in 2025 exactly, and how far would I have to get in a year, 2 years, 5 years to be on target? So what you have before you on 3 pieces of paper are the current K through 12 achievement compacts, all 11 of them, and the current data, and a proposed target for 6 of them. And then for 5 others, we don't yet have current data, or we don't yet have a proposed target, and therefore they just have question marks on them. All of these are completely draft, and we are looking for feedback of any kind on all the targets. But what I really feel I need to emphasize with the subcommittee is it is our charge to provide targets. And so they need to have thinking in them, but we just can't duck the responsibility of having some kind of a target there. It prompts discussion, I think, but to not have a target's not okay.
When you say our charge, who's our?
OEIB. And I know that you're not an OEIB board member, but as a subcommittee member, I would say giving good information or good thinking so that we can do the best job to set the targets would be super appreciated. So I'm just going to say a few words about why the proposed targets are where they are, and then I'm just going to stay silent and ask for feedback. The two graphs that are presented are based on the proposed targets, and they are exactly the same data. They're just presented in two different ways where the numbers are, and one has a data table and one doesn't. It was just meant to be two ways of looking at the data. 4-year and 5-year graduation seem to be pretty easy to set because we have 40-40-20, which means by 2025 we need to have 100%. And so we have targets for 4-year graduation and 5-year completion. It's arbitrary. This does not have to be this way, but the way we've set it, just for the purposes of discussion, is that the 4-year cohort graduation would be 100% by 2025. 5-year completion would be 100% by 2023. That's a slightly lower standard, the 5-year completion. So we're just positing that we could get there 2 years earlier. 3rd grade reading proficiency is based on the Oregon Department of Education's initial estimate when we started doing requests from them about where we were going to be with reading. 95% in 5 years. We can have a discussion about that. Where that number came from was our process. So we were the first ones to see that number a long way in the past when we started the budget process. 6th grade, not chronically absent, is based on the cohort of kids where they would be in 2019 in 6th grade. Those are the kids that are going to be graduating in 2025. So we posited 100% by 2019 on chronically absent. 9th grade credits earned, those are where those kids are going to be. 9th grade, the kids of 2025 are going to be in 9th grade. So we're saying 100% of kids by 9th grade are getting on-track credits earned, and 100% by 9th grade in 2022 are going to be not chronically absent. So almost all of these are driven off 40-40-20 except for reading, which is really driven off of a budget recommendation from the ODE. And I'll stop because now I'm interested in feedback, thoughts.
And these others that are not filled in? What's
Okay,
the plan there?
so kinder assessment, right now what we're asking districts to do is measure the participation rate. And that's not what we want to measure. We want to measure how many students are ready for kindergarten. So we're not there yet. Participation rate is like 98%.
Right, it's
That's not
already
what-
really high.
We need a cut score. We don't have it yet. Once we have a cut score, we can do a target. Completing 3+ college level courses, we do not collect that data from districts. We have a process underway through the ODE to do that, but we don't have anything yet. I cannot tell you what our baseline is. Post-secondary enrollment, I'll have that by our next meeting.
Yeah, we have that.
I was worried about the data I was using, and I took it out for this meeting because I just wasn't
Okay.
100% confident. I didn't want to present it
Okay.
publicly till I was 100%.
Okay.
But
I'm going to talk to that.
5th grade and 8th grade math proficiency, we do have current data, but it was a real head scratcher for me and our staff about what is our proposed target. And I'm very open to suggestions about what we target for the future. So those don't have targets yet, but they do have baselines.
I think actually the STEM bill actually has a target in it on
Okay.
proficiency in the legislation, so. But
Mark was here.
yeah, I don't know what the date was, but there is a
Yeah.
proposed target.
I definitely want to align if there's
Yeah,
something
yeah.
out there. Is it a target for 5th and 8th? as
It
far
was
as you
basically
know?
on the NAEP scores. It wasn't based on, it wouldn't be a school. I mean, you'd want to calibrate
Okay.
the math scores to NAEP, but
Okay.
it was it's to double the
Okay.
exceeds. I can't remember, I don't have it in my head right now, but I know we have it. So, you want feedback?
Absolutely. The one other thing I'll note, and then I'll stop talking, is if you look at the graphs, one thing I was surprised by was how the slopes are pretty darn similar. Maybe all good, all bad, I don't know. The one that really jumped out in terms of slope is third grade reading.
Sure.
That's a really sharp slope in terms of a target.
So we had a little team on data and sort of for our own purpose, because we're trying to line up the business council around supporting this and trying to make sure the metrics were confident. And the third grade reading, I think we really have to take a hard look, and I've talked to Rob about it. I mean, the question on all these is you always have to ask, are these aspirational? Are these, have we really structured ourselves to think we can achieve them? And on the third grade reading in particular, because we're making such a large investment, I think, you know, like I've said this to Nancy, I think in Rob, that, you know, we need to be able to come back to legislative in 2 years and say, this is where we are. And so I think we better be sure we're confident that all the strategies will get on the trajectory as fast as we think we will be on them, because it does us no good to over promise, especially when we're making a roughly $400 million investment or whatever the number is. And so I just think, and again, I think what we must expect is significant improvement. I don't know if 95% is realistic, and one way to think about it is how fast schools can turn. I mean, I know there have been examples where you can take where elementary schools have really focused on it and made a big change quickly. And again, I think we should be aggressive, but I guess I would go back to Hannah's point. We need to do that in collaboration with the schools so that, again, we're not over-promising. And so I would look to you all, Nancy and Rob, but just to make sure, especially when these goals, we need to make sure, especially that, you know, I think we need to distinguish between aspirational and what we think we can get done, especially on a short-term time frame.
So related question, maybe two. One is, Peter, it seems like some of these data points we have historical data for.
Yes, we do. Most of them, actually.
And so it seems to me that that might be important context to not just show where we are and where we want to go forward, because that's, again, maybe just aspirational or not, but where we've been, so that we can see our history and just exactly what it takes to get to this. And that may actually call out, making this up because I don't know the history of these data points, but if we have a data point where we really struggled in the past and then we have this trajectory that's a steeper climb than what we think even with an influx of resources we can achieve, it gets back to the point about setting ourselves up for failure. So, or the districts or whatever. So that just seems to me to be a really important contextual piece.
It would be easy to provide on this graph. You could see a couple years of history. And
Well, I would go about more than that.
I would go more than that.
And the other thing I would do, we've
Depends
done,
on which one. Some would
on the
have many,
reading,
many
the
years
reading we can go
some.
back. But the other thing we did on
Reading's
reading,
yeah.
just for this exercise, we did a dispersion, and I've done this before, like when we did this third grade reading in Portland. We did a school by school, and what you see on third grade reading, what's interesting is the huge deviation among schools.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's similar socioeconomic.
Yes.
So in Portland, this was several years ago, we found 6 schools in the Portland region that were low SES that were hitting 90-95%. We went to all the schools, Portland State, the dean went out and looked. They were all very conscious of what they were doing. It was all very purposeful. They were on it. I mean, it was, they had slight differences in program, but they had a plan. And so the lesson to me was, if the school is really focused and and I think that's what Rob is saying, you can get to these goals, but the question then is, how fast can we execute? Do we have the supports?
I have a question. What was the result of that, all that research and finding this practice?
We shared it with the other schools, and this was, and again, I would say, honestly, we didn't, this was something we did under the Leaders Roundtable, and we tried to provide that, and we shared it with the other superintendents. And I think the diffusion of that information was not easy to do. That's what I learned, is how do because it was the teachers and the school principal were really motivated. They had their act together, I guess is what I would say, on this issue. And I'm not saying the other schools weren't doing great work in other areas, but they weren't focused on the reading goal as much as the ones we looked at. And so I think, but again, what I think is important about it is that on third grade reading, there's huge dispersion among schools. And so one idea would be, should we be measuring the number of schools that are hitting some benchmark as opposed to looking at aggregate data for districts? Because I think it's interesting that that deviation. But the larger point on this is just, I think we oughta, I think I'm going back to what Hannah said. I think if this isn't a dialogue with the districts and the schools about what's reasonable and that we're all together on third grade reading, I think it's an opportunity of a lifetime if we get it right to say, if we collectively, and it's not just at the state level, it's with teachers, it's with principals, it's with everybody, we say we can show you with investment, we can make a difference. That will bring a lot of confidence in our ability as a state to show that more investment in education leads to better outcomes, which is what we want to do.
That was my other question, actually. Part B to my question, Peter, was in setting these, they're kind of incremental. I mean, you got the big target way out there in 2025 or whatever it is.
Right.
You've got incremental pieces. If I understand correctly, and I may not, the trajectory to get there, somewhat arbitrary, but the numbers are set really by you guys or ODE or however that might have happened. My question is whether or not there's opportunity here for some conversation. I think there ought to be opportunity here for conversation with districts. And to me, much like on the previous chart, the most valuable trajectory diagram, it includes historical data, but it also includes where my individual district shows up historically, and that gives me information to say, gosh, this is what I would have to do.
So if I could weigh in on one thing, if you saw the history, what you would see is flat in almost every one of these or down. And in most cases in the Achievement Compact metrics, you'll see flat. And when you live that life in a district, it's usually a win because it was done with a larger class size, and flat looks like a win in some of these. So looking at that historical, you're going to see this projected sharp change.
Right.
But I'll certainly provide that.
Which then I would think leads us all, I hope, exactly. So then it gets us to this, I hope, very honest, very candid conversation, two-way, about what does this really mean and what is it really going to take.
So we've talked about setting the trajectory from the beginning, and I understand that, but I go back to based on what? What do we believe? So we're making an investment. We're doing full day kindergarten in K-12. Then we're doing some early ed. Districts are struggling to try to figure out how they're going to do the capital in order to have their full day kindergarten. And that's a question that's still out there and one that has to be discussed. But I'm sorry, I was trying to figure out the reading proficiency at third grade in Massachusetts right now. I really struggle with 95% in this shorter time when I know what's going on right now and what we have in the proposed biennial budget for K-12. Because I don't see how you get to 95% students reading with the investment that we're making in, even with that, what you say is 400 million across the state, when that still means that we will have classes that are, the kindergarten classroom that's 44 right now. Does anyone believe that those students are really receiving the instruction that they need in kindergarten to be reading by third grade? Is there any way that we can say in good conscience that learning condition is A-okay for those students?
Why wouldn't you have the goal of 100% and make that the magnetic north and then do it in reverse and bring out all those things that you say that we're not going to hit that unless we do X, Y, and Z, but why wouldn't you have that inspirational goal?
Well, you should have an aspirational goal, but just look at what No Child Left Behind. So it's now 2014. right? 100% of students were supposed to pass all these tests by 2014. We have a waiver, so we don't have to send out the lovely letter. Our friends up north do not. Every school is getting a letter saying their school is failing because they did not reach 100%. Is there anyone who really believes that we were going to reach 100% of students passing all those benchmarks with what we were investing in education in this nation? At the federal level, when they give us, 26% of funding for one of their mandates, and then all of a sudden we're supposed to create this learning environment where students really can. So in Oregon, when we have, just look right up here at Baker School District. You notice there's the formula revenue, and then there's local revenue that they have. Some of our districts have passed huge local options and bonds to be able to help their students. Others haven't and can't. Why are they doing it? Because they know they need it. But yet, what are we doing as a board to help that? So I am really interested in having the conversation about a trajectory, but I would like to see that trajectory based on some kind of plan, strategies that will actually help us get there, rather than set us up for this point of, wow, as Ron shared, they set a trajectory and they didn't get there, so they failed. Well, if you don't set the trajectory in the first place based on some kind of reality, then how do you expect to get there? It's different, Dick, than the aspirational. And I love the aspirational, and I never want to think that any one of my students cannot succeed. I know they all can learn, but I know they all learn at different rates and speed, and they need different investments of my time and energy as an educator to get them.
How are you going to motivate? We're way off the subject here, probably.
No,
How are you going to motivate?
Right?
How are you going to motivate stakeholders to achieve your goal? I mean, you've heard me say this before. Norm Miller's goal for interstate batteries. Every friggin' car in America has interstate battery. There's no way in hell they're going to have a battery in every single car in America. But you don't tell him that, and don't tell his employees that, because that's what they think about every day. Good customer service and all that kind of thing. So yes, we have to be practical and that, but I get a little anxious when we're talking about, then that's stupid batteries. Now we're talking about lives.
Right.
And that's a little different,
Well, so can I just respond? Because I think this is a really important question, and I think it's facing us, because this budget, which we all worked on, says the goal is to and again, I'm not going to stick with 95% necessarily, but it is to dramatically improve third grade reading. We've got response to intervention, we've got out-of-school programs. Nancy and Rob and the OEIB have adopted a pretty aggressive strategy, including early learning, that we're going to be taking to the legislature, you are taking to the legislature, to say we want to improve on these results. And I think, again, I hear you, Hannah, in terms of total funding, and I wish we all, that's an issue unto itself. But the reality is, in this segment of the continuum, the governor has selected it to really put attention and resource. And I would argue it's very, very important that if those investments are made, and when those investments are made, that we have a really clear set of metrics that we are reporting back on, that the community in general, that the school community is behind, that says we're going to make a difference here. Because if we don't, the message is going to be, you make changes, put resources, and again, maybe not enough, and we maybe have to reduce them, but we have to have a plan to show improvement, or the confidence in the system is going to be lost by the general public, I think.
The cynics will take over.
Yeah, and frankly, that's the challenge, and I think it's a huge opportunity here. And I don't want to overpromise, but I think we need to have, reasonable goals, and on this third grade reading, I think it's just really essential that we carefully calibrate what our goals are. But they have to be improvements.
I think it would be fascinating to bring in some superintendents to talk about what the proposal is and what that looks like, and does that, have they really been engaged, and do they believe that the current plan is what's going to get 95%?
Or whatever the number is. Ask them what they think they can do. I think we should do that. I think it's a good idea. I don't know, Nancy or Rob.
So, do you have
No, go ahead.
I'm just looking at time, so I'm writing down notes, and Some of what folks have talked about are very easy in terms of changing the graph. What's not so easy is our charge to come up with trajectories, and it's not an immediate need, but it is something we should be providing. I think by not, we're asking them to set goals, but we're not making it transparent. So that's something I think will come back in one form or another with this input.
I agree with
taken into account.
Yes. Okay.
So a question on the chronic absent,
Yes.
not chronically absent. So I guess I go back to you, Peter. If you want us to set this trajectory, if you want me to say I support this trajectory, then tell me what is going to happen to ensure that 100% of ninth graders are not chronically absent by the year, 2022?
So I want to be clear, the only one of these lines that's based on thinking like that about what are we doing and why do we believe it, the only one is the reading. All of the others are based on 40-40-20 and arguing backwards with just a black box of forgetting investment. If 40-40-20 is the goal and you want compacts to line up to it. So that's one of the huge failings of them, is none of them are based on research about practice. They're all based on lining it back to 40-40-20. And they prompt the questions that you folks are asking of, okay, if that's how we get there, what would we have to do?
Right.
But I haven't done any of that. We haven't done any of that work. The only place where anyone's put work into exactly how would the investment drive a change is that really steep reading one, and we've got some questions about that one. But I don't want to over-promise that there's years of research into thinking. It's an arithmetic, looking into the future and dragging it backwards.
So then I think aspirational should be written all over this. It should be based on 40-40-20, not based on practice. And it should be, as we talk with districts about where they're going in each one of these metrics, then if we want by 2015 in fifth grade completion 78.6%, then to have, what will it take for you to get there? What's your reality in that? So that they're not making up numbers, because I don't want them, again, to give us numbers that aren't based on anything, and that we know what we need to do to support them. That would be really helpful.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a hugely important distinction.
Yep.
I mean, the whole 40-40, in my head, and the 40-40-20 was, to get to 40-40-20, it's going to take more money and it's going to take redesign. You can't get to 40-40-20 without changing practice in schools and putting more money in. I think it's both. And I think when we talk in aspirate, it's like a benchmarking. In business terms, it's saying, you got this goal, we don't know how to get there. I mean, we know it's a combination of things. So it should spark our creativity, it should spark our enthusiasm, and that's one role of goal setting. The other role of goal setting is your management.
Exactly.
Where are you going to go next year, 2 years? And I think it's very helpful, Hannah, because I think we have to distinguish those two.
Yeah.
And in terms of what we're talking, if we ask a school, what is it going to take to get to third grade reading? Again, I hear the resource question, but it also takes practice. I mean, a change in practice that's purposeful with the students in terms of the reading instruction, I think. I mean, I'm not the educator, you are, but that's what I think I've learned. If you don't have a plan in your school of how to get students in a consistent reading program, you're probably not going to get there.
I'm going to digress for a minute, because we're talking about reading. And I just had a conversation with a kindergarten teacher who is being forced to use a curriculum in one of our districts in this state that has her pointing to a word, and it has a script for her. It times her how long she is supposed to pause before she moves on. It is absolutely absurd to expect every student in that kindergarten classroom to learn when the educator's hands are tied, and if she doesn't follow that curriculum, then she's being reprimanded. There has got to be, when you talk about change in practice, it cannot be it is just, when I heard that, I just wanted to just lay down and just cry that is what those students are being subjected to.
I'm with you. So when I mean practice, that's not what I'm talking about, practice. You understand that. I'm talking about teachers working together with a common set of principles to get their kids to read.
But this is part of the reality that people don't hear about, and people don't understand necessarily what's going on. And there's little pockets of this that we have to address, and that's where building that collaborative relationship in a district, I just, I want to be able to differentiate for my students, and I want every educator to be able to do that, and I want them to have the skills to be able to do that. So, sorry to digress.
That's
Sounds good.
I'd like to conclude.
Go. Yes.
One thing Hannah said, I want to see if the group agrees, because it's very clear direction and would enable us to move forward, is if we were to use something like the graphs that are shown, there would be a disclaimer or an explanation that this line, these targets are based on 40-40-20. And that shows clearly it's not necessarily based on the research, and I could work on language to get back, but I think that's really clear, is to denote, because I don't think I did that clearly enough in my description or my thing, that this is simply a line drawn backwards from a goal. And it might prompt discussions locally, district, statewide about, well, that means we have to jump 2 percentage points this year. What's the plan to get there? How are we going to move 2 percentage? The other thing I just want to say before we finish this one, every single district achievement compact also shows a budget number. Hannah referred to it, but I can't miss the chance to say that not only is there district budget information, but the Quality Education Commission comes up with an amount that's recommended to fully fund the district to get to older goals.
Yep.
So for every district, they actually have information there about funding and funding gap. And thanks to the Quality Ed Commission for getting, and thanks ODE for getting that on that form.
So it seems to me, I like that, and it seems to me that the other piece of the caveat, Peter, is this is what it is, and this is what it is intended to do.
Yes.
It's intended to spark that collaborative conversation in districts and between districts and the OEIB.
Right. And can I go back, I was about to bring that up anyway. I mean, let's shout out to the Quality Ed Commission. I mean, that is a hugely important piece of the work in my head.
Yep.
But looking at you guys, but I mean, I think the last report was good because it does talk about funding and, again, I hope I'm using the right word to make sense, but practice. I mean, it says these are the best practices that have gone out and investigated, and so I think you can present to schools, this is our best understanding of what it takes to hit these goals. And I think you've got a much better investment case if you say that we think we know how to do this, and if you put money in these, we can get to these results. So,
Can we do my last agenda?
Yes,
or
let's
our
do the
last
last one.
agenda item?
Yep.
Our last one is about return on investment.
Does Ron have access to this?
Ron, what I'm going over now is on the website. You don't have a printed copy, but it's on the website with the meeting materials.
Okay.
It's on the website, correct, Seth? The PowerPoint?
It wasn't this morning.
It was, the one that you sent this
Yeah.
morning? Yes, it is, but it's
Okay.
under additional materials. It was posted at about 8:30 or.
Oh, I looked before then.
Sorry. So last meeting, we received a report about return on investment that showed what some other states are doing and what some suggestions about what Oregon could do for return on investment. And this is the first of what I assume is going to be a number of different presentations about return on investment. One thing the committee said last time is, in terms of the return, let's talk achievement compact metrics. So everything you're going to see today in terms of returns are metrics, and I picked 2 metrics, reading and 5-year completion, as a start. But we could do the same kind of analysis on 6th grade attendance, whatever you want. It's a lot of data. I don't want to give too much at one time, but I'm interested in giving this to folks. And in particular, towards the end, I've got some critical questions about what now? What different kinds of analyses, or what might we want to do as a commission, or what might you want to direct OEIB to do in terms of next steps? So first off, I've got 4 straight graphs just to show you how in Oregon we really have 3 Oregons when you look at school districts. We have little school districts, we have medium-sized school districts, and we have big school districts. That's sort of how the ODE looks at them. And after doing this analysis, I can see maybe we don't have 3 Oregons, but we don't have 1 Oregon. We have a lot of diversity in terms of size, per student funding. It really makes it hard to analyze all of Oregon at once. But just in case you ever wanted to, this is what an ROI graph would look like for every district in Oregon that has at least one kid who did third grade assessment. One thing I want to say about this, all of these graphs, they are based on 4 years of data. It's not 1 year. They're based on third and fifth grade reading. And you might wonder, why did you pick fifth grade reading too? Just to have less variation. Hannah mentioned this before. With some districts, your third grade reading goes up and down every year because your whole third grade is 28 kids. So by including third and fifth grade, it just kind of smoothed out the numbers, gave a little bit less variation for smaller districts. But really, third and fifth grade reading are not very different for a given kid. They may be different year to year, but for a given kid, they're similar. It's just a statistical thing, but just made it a little bit cleaner. It's really no different than it would be for third grade. And what you have on the first graph, and I really would not like to spend much time on it because it's a really kooky graph, but it does show you that in Oregon, we have one district spending $6,000 per kid, and one district spending just under $31,000 per student. This one is really, 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 really small, and I would hypothesize probably has one very high-need student who skews the numbers. You've got a couple of very small districts. You'll see in a minute, there are no large districts at all the way on the right side. And this 6,000 I actually think is an error, because I just don't believe it. I know the district. I did some research, it seems to be an error, and actually it's not included in some of the subsequent slides. Now, every district above 500. Now the graph looks a little different, so just going back and forth, here's the first graph. We go all the way to $31,000 per kid. Now as we get to a little bit bigger
That's
districts,
Pam's daughter over there.
Yeah.
we've got one district
Oh,
sort
it
of
means food.
skewing the results at 16,000, but it's a tighter graph. And now you have here a little bit more of what you might be expecting on ROI. Low spending, high performance, high spending, high performance, low spending, low, high spending, low. And I'm going through this quickly because then we get to the meatier ones a little quicker. But just for grins, what about districts over 1,000? Now we have a graph that's even more spread out. You can see more distinctly that there are some over here wondering what they're doing right, and maybe some over here wondering what they're doing not so right. And then finally, districts over 2,500. There's 56 in Oregon. These districts represent over half the kids in Oregon. Huge numbers of kids represented in this graph. And again, you see that you've got different groupings. So for the purposes of this committee, we decided to look at how ODE groups districts. And we said, okay, there's differences. Let's look at small, medium, large. Small, 1 to 999 kids. Medium, 1,000 to 699. Large, 7,000 or above. In Oregon, over half of the districts in Oregon have fewer than 1,000 students. That's among the most important realizations about Oregon and school funding to get to start with. There's a lot in that to unpack that we're not going to necessarily do right now. The state where I came from has a population, the county I came from has a population larger than Oregon, and it's one school district. So there's real differences among West and East in different states about size of districts, and a lot of debate about what it means. Small school districts represent 7% of the enrolled kids in Oregon. Medium districts, well, that's a third of the state, or medium, and it's over a third of the enrollment. Large districts, that's 8% of Oregon, it's more than half the kids. Again, this is not the only way you would divide up the state. It's how the Oregon Department of Ed does it in their report card. So it's one way to do it. You may say to me after this meeting, I didn't like it. I want it divided differently. First slide is ROI, third and fifth grade reading, small districts. There's 95 in Oregon. And on all of these graphs, and this is the recommendation from the author of the report back to Oregon, don't waste your time beating up districts in this quadrant. Maybe that's what folks want to do, but it's not what folks get a lot of mileage out of. What they get out of is finding out what are these districts doing and interviewing them, getting qualitative information. So, in that light, the notable districts on this graph who are showing the highest ROI value are Enterprise, Glide, Bandon, and Monroe. On this
Where's
metric.
Monroe?
Monroe is in Lynn County.
Oh.
And they're actually not weeny-teeny districts. I was worried that maybe the districts would have 8 kids in them. What can you learn about a district with 8 kids that could make a district with 8,000? But these districts, with respect to small districts, are kind of medium-sized. We're going to talk at the end about what might we do with Glide, Bandon, Monroe, and Enterprise to learn more about it. But that's just notable. Next one is medium-sized districts. The notable districts that stuck out were Sherwood, Grants Pass, Newburgh, and Baker. I must admit I don't know a lot about every one of these districts, and I would defer, probably there's folks who might know, Hannah especially might know more than I do about some of these. On a few of the districts that are coming up, I know something about on the graduation. I think some of you will recognize why the graph is the way it is. But again, just looking at sort of the notable ones, those 4 popped out. And then for the big districts, there's only 71. Oh, sorry, that's a misprint. There's, sorry, I'll get the right number. It's not 71. That was obviously just a copy. It is 16.
16, yeah.
Okay, sorry. 16 districts in Oregon. The ones that are showing up on the high side, West Lynn, then Lapine, Beaverton, Oregon City, and North Clack. And they all were pretty similar out here, with West Lynn being really the outlier, low spender, high performer on 3rd grade reading. I want to note that these districts are getting close to 90% of kids reading in 3rd grade, and they're spending less than the mean score. Now there's probably other things about these districts if you know them, but I'm just saying. So, and this, anybody guess what this district is? Highest spending large district per kid?
Portland.
Yeah, Portland. And then that's Eugene, and I don't remember what that one is.
Or Salem.
I'd have to look. And I didn't want to publicly put out all the districts on here, but all of this is from publicly available information on the web. Every bit of this is not specific to the research.
I think this is 84% of our students?
No, it is 54.
54% of our students. And that's great. I mean,
Yeah.
you don't see a whole lot down over here, which is really good news. And we do know that when you talk about the 3 Oregons, there's at least 2 major Oregons in the rural districts.
And I'm really interested in other ways we might divide it up. I did it by county, and the numbers made no sense to me. I don't know enough about Oregon.
Yeah.
You have to you have to put some counties together to get the numbers big enough, and I just didn't want to go there yet. We also have it by RAC. And some districts are not part of a RAC, some are, but we could see this by RAC. Okay, now let's look at...
Maybe ESD?
And we have it by ESD. Yep. Some counties are school districts. Lincoln County is a school district. Okay, now the same thing, but now we're looking at completion of high school. Now you look at the small districts, again, 97 of them, and you get this graph. Really different. There's a lot of variation. There's a district at 50% among the smalls. It's weeny-teeny. So 50% could be 1 out of 2. The notable districts here, Rainier, Central Lynn, and Perryvale came out up here. But there's a lot up here that also might be notable, that if we want to investigate more or visit or something, there's a lot more in this little quadrant, Middle-sized, Scappoose, Redmond, Corbett, Lebanon, LeGrand. Now, one thing that jumps out at me, and I don't know, I know some of these districts we interviewed as members of the Quality Ed Commission a couple years ago, because we as Quality Ed Commission members used to go out and interview. districts and schools that were doing better than we would predict. And we met with them and learned about how important teacher collaboration was, or articulation. Scappoose was on that list 2 years ago. Lebanon's got a really vibrant fifth-year program. So I wonder what's driving some of these, but that's this little group of 5.
A lot of proficiency-based practice.
Yep.
Differentiated learning, as Hannah mentions.
And finally, the last graph is the big districts and how are they doing with 5-year completion. And the 2 that popped out were Westland, Wilsonville, and Greater Albany. I'll mention that Greater Albany is another district that's all in on 5th year. That's a 5th year program, West Albany High School in particular, and that's generating. Last year this wouldn't have counted. Our 5th year numbers were artificially low because we weren't counting, now we're counting, so those are ins. So that's the last graph, and my question for the group is, what more would you like to see? And actually I wrote the questions down. So, other groupings that you might think would be good. Regional groupings, what might you like to see? Other metrics that you're really, really interested in besides the 2 big ones we shared. And then just to throw out there, is there any interest among the committee or any thoughts about visiting? Something that's been sort of a standard practice at Quality Ed Commission. We could even maybe tag team with them some visits just to find out more. So I'll just stop talking and see what the committee has to say about this.
I'd like to hear from you, Hannah. What do you think of this?
Well, I think it's interesting, I think, to dig in and ask the question why.
Peel.
What's going on here, and to better understand.
I totally agree with focusing on those upper left-hand quadrant districts and doing, a case study illustration that comes out with some of this.
I think it would be fascinating too, to look at some of the Tellurian data and see if there's a relationship with some of the, when you talk about the teaching and learning conditions, are these over here in this quadrant, are they giving feedback that there's some missing components?
I put on here teacher and student surveys. Teacher, we have identified in Oregon our teacher survey, it's TELL.
Yeah.
I have that in there. It was really interesting. I don't have it yet, but I'll bring it to the next meeting. Teacher satisfaction is not driven entirely by per district spend. There's so many other things that drive that too, based on looking at money. But it's not quite ready for prime time, but I'll definitely include, because we have that for a lot of these districts, not every, but other.
Well, I think the districts by SES, would be, this is just, I assume part of the dollar differences are because of the funding formula, which obviously weights for income, but it'd be nice, some have, that's another cut on this.
Right.
But I love it. I think this is what we should be doing. This is like the core of, again, I also think it's really helpful to do it by school as opposed to district, because you see this huge variation in schools, even within districts, large districts. And frankly, that a whole other question, to me, is always interesting, is how much some districts have way more variation in their school performance than other large districts, which is another sort of set of interesting questions about performance.
So I have a follow-up for the group. In the other committee that I staff, we target our work to certain deliverables. And that really helps staff, and I think the committee know when we've gotten where we need to get.
What committee is that?
Equity and partnerships. And I'd like to propose that it would, because every meeting we have good discussions. Sometimes the conversations converge, sometimes they diverge. And I'm interested in a product, at least something to come from the committee. So as an example, one piece of work that could come out of the committee is some kind of a policy paper or white paper or recommendation about what do we do with return on investment. We asked as a committee that we analyze it. We're commissioning OEIB to bring data. Well, what next? We do not have the capability of doing this for a school district schools. However, we do have the capability to make a recommendation that this should be something that's done in school districts, and the model that we've provided is something that we've done at district level, where we've looked at SES, we've looked at the local conditions of the schools and accounted for that. So just something to throw out is a possible final work product of this would be a synthesis of the research that we've done and then some recommendations in terms of work
Would this
that we have
before
done.
or after, if we did visits? Would we want to, if we did visits throughout the state, would you do this as you were presenting this white paper or communicate, or do we want input on what they thought or what have you? I really like the idea of visiting outside of Portland and going out to the area. I gave Pam an itinerary that we leave at 6 o'clock in the morning, visit 8 places, and come back at 6 o'clock at night.
Personally, I think you do that way before you write a word of the report. 'Cause
Exactly.
that's going
That's
to
what
make
I
the
thought.
report have life and legs
Exactly.
and spirit to it.
Maybe in February or March, do that.
You know, I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, I was just listening.
I think, I guess the other, I don't, I mean, in terms of this committee's role, I love this committee, and I think we've done amazing work on the budget process and in other areas, but I think Hannah's point, I think the big issue that strikes me, it comes up every time, is really, and I don't know if we're the right committee to do it, but at least around funding and outcomes, maybe we are, I don't know, is I think we need the theory of, I really do think I think part of the problem that Hannah describes is just confusion about purposes of different reports and activities. And somehow, we have these good conversations, but I think getting a clear framework, what is the role, and it sounds like Nancy's already on, what is the role of achievement compacts? How do achievement compacts connect with budgets? How do we, at what point are we talking about ambition, the more ambitious goals for redesign purposes? What are we talking for managerial accountability purposes? All those questions sort of hang out there, and we don't, and until we get that really clarified with our stakeholders, I think I think there's a need to create that kind of a report. I don't know if I'm being clear, but I don't know if somebody needs. I don't know if we need to do it, but I think the OEIB needs that. It's sort of a working assumptions about how the system, all these pieces fit together. So that we can, and then when we engage so that when you're engaging on an achievement compact, we can be really clear with the superintendents and local folks what their role is in relation to the whole system.
So when you're talking about a report, you're talking about putting together some sort of framework for how it ought to work?
How it ought to work, what we believe we're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, so for example, I'm not sure, I'd be really, and I think the most tangible example I have is what we were just talking about, third grade reading. I think we have an extraordinary opportunity. I'm not sure the average school superintendent out there, the 197, see that opportunity. If we in the next 4 years can show that it's possible to dramatically improve reading scores with targeted investments and the right set of supports both in schools and outside of schools, that's a huge opportunity for Oregon to show that public education is moving forward in a really positive way, and I think would encourage additional investments, additional work. But I don't know that the whole community understands that opportunity.
And that's a missing opportunity.
And that's a huge opportunity. And
Exactly.
I guess
I agree.
But I don't. And if we aren't describing our thinking to the whole community, including obviously then it goes to the legislature as well. So we're talking. We've got our story down. I guess I'm not being very clear. I don't think. But
No, that.
Well, I mean, it seems to me that the process of making progress is an iterative one that
It is.
involves lots of conversation
Yep.
and lots of collaboration, to Hannah's point. So what I don't like about a report is if we try to do a report that says, here's the static status.
No, that's not what I'm talking about.
Of where we are, but I
No, that's
like
not what I'm
the
talking
idea of
about.
putting together a framework about how all the pieces could fit
right.
together.
And I think part of that framework is constant dialogue. I mean, I think the whole point of this gets back to the achievement. The achievement compact should be a back and forth conversation between, the state policymakers in the field about what each needs to be successful. And that, I think that, I'm not saying whether it's a report or a conversation, I don't know what it is, but I think we've got to get clarity on
But
this.
I like the idea of having, if we had a map
Yeah.
of how it's all supposed, a graphic map
Yeah,
of how
that-
it's all supposed to fit together, that could include these iterative conversations as part of it.
It's probably a map, that's a better way.
That makes a lot of sense to me, because I think all of the pieces, from my perspective, Peter, all the pieces we've looked at in this meeting and in previous meetings belong somewhere on the map.
Yeah.
She
But,
could create the map.
but it's not.
Between the two of you, you could. create
But
a
it's
view.
not, but the sort of the relationship between them all and how it's supposed to, so should we have targets? Yeah, but in isolation, no, right? Should we have a way to measure progress toward the targets? Of course we should. Should we have something that measures the impact of our investments? Of course we should, whether it's ROI or whatever it is. Should we have evidence of best practice? Should we learn from the field in terms of what they're, but yes, all of those pieces. But
Yeah, Yamhill County just got a grant 2 years ago from Pew on juvenile, or not juvenile, excuse me, criminal justice system in Yamhill County, and their map is as big as this table. When a person kisses a police officer down there and goes through the whole system, in prison and back out to the parole officer and everything, it's unbelievable. And it really gives you crystal clear of what the education, or what the process could be. We could do that.
Okay, that's very helpful, and I'll just conclude by saying we're doing a lot of work as an agency right now, mapping processes to outcomes, so it's very, very timely. It's the kind of thinking we're doing right now. It's, I do recognize that all three of these were connected together, and I think the discussion has helped me see at least to better connect and better synthesize them, and so I really appreciate
really
the
good.
feedback.
I know, it's
really good.
helpful to look at it.
Yeah, no, it's great. Glad it stimulated such good ideas, so I think we're done, ready
How
for
can we
public
help
comment.
you?
Okay,
How can we
good.
help you?
Well, I think taking this feedback, and again, the next iteration of how might some of these things go together, I have a lot of feedback. I think Dick or I will be asking if any folks are interested in site visiting. I think it's a good way to highlight successes, and it's kind of as a public facet to it, but I don't think we're quite ready yet to
Right.
propose that, but I'd be super interested in helping.
Is that a good idea, Hannah, to visit?
I think it's
Right.
great.
Hannah's
That's-
visiting
that's
just
my-
to-
You're
that's my-
visiting all the time.
Yeah.
You can help us set that up.
Yeah,
Can I just,
absolutely.
one on higher ed, and I'll just be brief on this, but
Oh,
we're spending a
please.
lot of time on goals for post-secondary, and I would just, at some point, I think we've had a breakthrough in how you think about the post-secondary goal setting. The problem we've had, and it ties to, the reason I want to raise it is it ties very much to the high school completion. What we've done now is, we've got a cohort analysis, so rather than talking about it at a school level, we talk about just what you guys did in early childhood. We talk about there are 45,000 sophomores, and we know now where all those sophomores are. You know, say we go back to the 10 years ago, we know where they've gone, we know exactly where they are at age 23. And so you can, rather than setting school level goals, we start with, you go through and we do it every year, so that you can really start to say what percentage of 23-year-olds have a 4-year degree, and how many have an associate degree, how many have graduated from high school, and how many of those high school students went on to go to college. And with that, you can, at a OEIB level, you can really sharpen your focus really quickly. And then you can use that to help understand. But especially as you go from high school to community college to higher ed, the data at the school level gets very confusing because students move around so much.
Yep.
So you have to trade, this is the longitudinal, this is the longitudinal data, but for higher ed, it's just really powerful way to look at this data. So I would encourage us.
Okay.
Brian Cox is all over it right now, so.
Yeah, we'll be seeing a similar type of presentation with different nuances with higher ed next or next week, so.
Okay, public testimony. Jim Anderson, you're up to bat here. We have a guy that has a good handwriting.
That counts for something,
Well,
don't you think?
yeah, when you look at that mess.
Yeah.
They found
Just
the
that I
stone for me.
told that
handwriting.
before that we had to have a special class on penmanship.
Yeah, it's good.
I
Okay.
only got a C, so you can.
Identify-
I don't know, it looks pretty good.
Yeah, it does. Identify yourself, Jim, and then 3 minutes.
Yes, I'd certainly like to reinforce the comments of Mandarin. They represent a lot of my thinking. I'd just like to add a couple more points. One is the university should be doing a lot of this work already. They're the ones who are teaching our teachers how to teach. And I find the universities, when I ask around, that the university students have no idea of how to teach minority kids. It's never even covered in the universities. And in sitting around about a half a dozen kindergarten classes for a year, I see that the students aren't learning. The teaching methods are good, but the kids, as Dr. Golden said, aren't ready to learn. And I see them not being able to respond. They learn how to echo, so that the kids who do know the answer say the answer, and these kids are getting expert at echoing. And so that if the lead makes a mistake, like the teacher points to A and they say O, the whole class says O. It's obvious that they haven't learned. They're just echoing. And this is unfortunate. But I don't think the universities even recognize this. We used to have other methods of teaching, like tutoring. We used to have tutoring in the Portland Public Schools, and that's been eliminated, helping the kid who's the lowest. And this, I understand, is emphasized by New York City College of Urban Education, that if you help the lowest child, the whole class rises. And I think this is one. Thank you. I feel that the critical thing is the corrective action effective that we're doing? And that's those last charts indicate that, but we need to know what the corrective action was, and visiting the principals is probably a good, effective thing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Can you look up on the computer at stationjournal.com? Okay, Dr. Dapo,
I'm glad I came.
want to identify yourself, sir? And
I'm Dr. Dapo.
You bet. 3 minutes.
Operation Easy. I'm glad I came. It's wet. I don't like to get into the cold or wet. I'm glad I came. Yes, Duncan Weiss. You know who that is? He said something this morning, very powerful to me. I'm going to take that with me. He said you have to have an improvement, a plan before you have improvement. That's a heavy wisdom. You have to have plans. He shook me up when he said, in my church, if you say that, everybody will say, amen, amen. And then after the church, my pastor would grab me by my jacket, will ask me a question. We will close the door. What did he see before he said that? What was going through his mind to say that? We have to have plan to have improvement. I'm dealing with a school in Pullman community, King Elementary School. Was declared to be one of the worst schools in Oregon. No plans to do any good with those kids. I know that. I'm there. They're going like this. For many, many years, that school is declared one of the worst schools in Oregon. And we sit comfortably. I don't hear anybody talking about it. 52% of the population is African Americans. That's it. We don't talk about that. No. Shh. I was telling my wife this morning, I said, hey, we don't talk about that. That is when you hear, shh. No. No plans. Thank you for that wisdom. And I know I don't remember how many times you mentioned the word plan in your vocabulary. Yeah. We must have plan. You say right, You write it right, but we implement it. Can we do that? Implementation. I'm glad to see all of you. You keep on working on it. Listen, the year is coming. This guy, we're going to be going after you one by one. I've got your Hannah. We're going to meet you. We're going to meet with you. And of course, I want to get to know you. I want part of that wisdom that you've got. I need some more of that. And then for your work, this is my first time of seeing you, by the way, Pam Corey's. And yeah, well, listen, have a wonderful holiday.
Thank you.
By my holiday, you want to know what I eat? I love to drink eggnog. That's
Okay,
me.
good.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, Ellen, thank you.
Hi, Ellen Mackey, Social Venture Partners, Portland. I will make most of my comments offline to Peter, but they will relate to the importance of looking at cohorts as you work on these trajectories, and especially in reference to that third grade reading one, which I think you all recognize that steep slope probably isn't something that is achievable per se, but that doesn't mean that there aren't going to be ways you can break out and look at the progress over time, given the investments we're making. And the really important thing is going to be to sort of parse out the parts of that and say, for kids who are born today, those are the ones who are born today. Actually, born maybe 9 months from now, or whenever the budget gets put into place, not 9 months from now, but when the budget's put in place, they'll have the benefit of the full impact of all those investments. But they're not going to be in third grade for 8 years.
8 years.
So I think that looking at these cohorts and then developing some trajectories and expectations that relate to, the staging of those investments and their impact on kids at different points, and is going to be very important. But I think you all recognize that.
Totally agree.
Okay, anything else? Okay, Ron, we're adjourned then. Nancy, thank you very much.